But to be brief, she earned her PhD in history from Georgetown. She came here to BYU in 2006, promoted to associate professor and more recently full professor. She is a specialist in the history of early modern France, and I dare say especially the lived religious experience of inhabitants of early modern France. Some of her most prominent works in that respect are the books Creating Catholics, Catechism and Primary Education in early modern France, and more recently, Scandal in the Parish, Priests and Parishioners in 18th century France. Perhaps most applicable to our gathering today, Dr. Carter was the pioneer in the history department in developing an entirely online on-demand course, World Civilization, World History, from the beginnings of time to 1500. She's taught this for many years. And when I decided to do a fumbling attempt at doing a similar online version of the second half of the World Civ sequence, I met and talked with and learned from Karen multiple times. And if you look at my syllabus and the way I set it up, you'll see lots of outright stealing. Again, just happy to introduce friend and colleague Karen Carter.
Thanks, Kirk. Okay, while you're all getting settled and eating, did anybody read this? The selected negative teaching evaluations of Jesus Christ from McSweeney's. Very inconvenient class, always holds lectures on top of mountains in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, but never close to the main campus. Inconsistent attendance policy, said we had to be in class by 9 a.m. every day. Over half the class showed up late or didn't attend until the last meeting, but we all got the same grade. Kind of absent-minded. My name's Simon and he called me Peter for the entire semester. He's nice enough, I guess, but he doesn't vet his TAs. They all provide completely different, conflicting lecture notes. Tip, try to get in Luke's section. Tells too many stories, easy to get him off track during lectures. Feels like a class for farmers. Hope you like talking about seeds. Weed seeds, mustard seeds, seeds. Brought a bunch of snacks for the whole class once, then never did it again. Kind of a letdown. This one was my favorite one. What is this class? Why do we keep going out on fishing boats? What was with the thing where we had to sort out goats from sheep? Why do we have to shove a camel through the eye of a needle? What is this class? Okay, so just a little bit of background. I started teaching for BYU Online, a course for BYU Online in the fall of 2018. So this is my 4th year doing it. And I've taught it every fall, winter, and summer since then. So this is my 11th time teaching it online. And I had already been doing some independent study courses before this, including the one for History 201. And I didn't really like it all that much. And so I was doing a lot of thinking about how I might do a better job with this course for BYU Online. And I was also thinking that, so it's the first half of World Civ. Our courses are capped at 150. So some semesters you might not have 150, but others you might. And so it's a lot of students. And I figure that means a lot of compromises. Whenever we're teaching that big of a class, there are going to be some compromises. And so I thought, could I actually do a better job with some things online than in a class of 150 students? Are there actually advantages to this? Because when I first decided or agreed to do it, it was sort of out of duty and not really out of a real desire to do it. And so I tried to think about ways that I might actually make a really good class. So just some things that I thought about. Will students actually prefer the online format? Or would they benefit from it? Could I interact with students in more meaningful ways in the digital world rather than in person, especially again with a class of 150 students? There were many students that even if I memorized their names, I barely talked to them at all. So I thought, well, can I actually interact more meaningfully with students? Could I do a better job of teaching reading and writing? Could I do a better job of assessing students on what they learned in the course rather than testing on them on what they already know? So after almost 4 years, I think I can predictably say outcomes have been mixed. Some things worked out and some things haven't. It's been quite an experiment. I think that for some students, the online format works really well. And of course, this is something you've probably already learned since you got to be online for a little while and without much choice. For some students, I think the benefits of the online format actually outweigh the drawbacks. And of course, there are many students who wouldn't be able to take courses if they didn't have the online courses. And that's another way that I feel like I'm providing a service for them. A lot of them have reached out to me and told me that, it's oftentimes it's women who are having babies or have babies and need to be at home, or women who are following a spouse, or sometimes actually a man who's following a spouse somewhere across the country and just needs to finish their degree. And so I like being able to do it just for that. For other students, I think the traditional classroom probably works better. And part of the problem is sometimes it's too late for them to know that, but at least I can try to mitigate some of the problems. So I'm going to start with, my answers to these questions. So my answer to all these questions is a qualified yes. And I'll be talking about them more as I go along, but just a couple of things about the online format. One thing that I like and one thing that I don't like at all. So first, I've been really pleased with the online discussions in Canvas. I don't know if you've tried doing digital dialogues in Learning Suite, but it's very clunky. The Canvas system is much better. And I'm finding that I'm having much better interactions with students through those discussions than I often did in a class of 150, because I mean, think about it, a class of 150, there's no way that you can possibly get all students to participate. But in an online discussion, I do get all of them to participate, and their discussions have really been good once I've sort of figured out how to instruct them in how to do discussions, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. It also helps students who aren't quick on their feet, right? There's lots of students who just need a little bit more time to think, and the online format works really well with them. And being a kind of person like that myself, it's another reason why I appreciate it, because I have some sympathy for some of the students. And sometimes students think that there's a right answer to questions, and the discussions pretty much show them that there isn't, and that's not actually what I'm looking for, so that can be helpful too. You do have to craft the questions carefully, and you have to make sure that students understand that the purpose of the discussion is to discuss and engage with their colleagues and not to pontificate. And so that takes a little while. Some of them will have these huge long posts, and I'm like, nobody's going to read this. TLDR, like you gotta be a little bit more concise in this, and they learn fairly quickly that that's what they need to do, and so it works out pretty well. The thing that I don't like is proctored testing. It's awful. It's an invasion of students' privacy. Their computers, I don't know if you realize this, but students have bad computers. They do not work well. And so they're constantly having problems with the system is called Examity. It's a constant problem. I just dread every single test, because I know of all of the emails that are going to say urgent in the subject line, and it's 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, call Examity, and then I tried. I got somebody in India, and these kinds of things. So I don't like it. So one of the next things I want to deal with is, and I may not be able to do this until we have a new GE version of this course. But the next big question is, can I create assessments that don't require proctoring, but can also be graded quickly? Right now, the average time for me to grade an exam is about 5 minutes. And it's multiple choice, fill in the blank, and short answer questions. And so I don't want to take any longer than that. When you have 150 students, that really does add up. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. I should say I have probably more questions than answers in this presentation. So if there are some of you who have answers and want to share them with me, you can do that. So let me talk about some things specifically pedagogically that I've learned that I think can be applied to traditional classes as well. So even if you don't have any intention of ever doing an online class, these are some things that you can think about anyway. So first of all, this is the way that I've structured the course. It is an asynchronous course, so there are recorded lectures. The lectures are short. The longest one is 20 minutes. Most of them are closer to 10. because students don't have that much patience for these long lectures. But so each lesson consists of usually some text that I've written and one or more lectures and some reading in textbook and reading in other sources as well. 24 lessons divided into 4 units. Each lesson has either an online discussion or a short reading response between 200 and 300 words. 1 exam for each unit, and then a primary source paper. And so the students have 2 lessons every week or 1 lesson and an exam every week, and it pretty much goes at a good clip. But it is one of the things that I wanted to do was with the independent study course, like there's so many students that just don't finish, right? I don't know if any of you have taught for independent study before, but that's the biggest problem is that they don't finish because they just think, oh, I have all this time to do it. And I didn't want that with these kinds of classes. And so we do have deadlines every week, 2 deadlines every week, so that they have to make sure that they're staying up, or at least that's I delude myself into thinking that they are staying up with all, they're caught up with all.
Does it ever show you like when they watch the videos? I'm just curious, like, do kids chunk them together or do they pick like their optimal? Because I'm just now, when you said that, I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Then that we have these hour-and-a-half long lectures, which actually seem to keep students engaged, but maybe that's just our impression. But I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think a classroom experience keeps students a little bit more engaged than just a video. And it's just a PowerPoint with my voice. I refused to do a video of myself. And so I think it's more of a digital thing. I think that it needs to be shorter. But when I was first creating the course, that's what all the literature said was really not too much more than 10 minutes at a time. They don't have the attention spans. I also decided,
Just going to add, keeping it short is good, but you need to also be clear and precise. Don't drag out, even though it's short video.
don't include too many stories.
Yeah.
The other thing that I decided to do when I started this class was that I decided I was not going to use teaching assistants. And so I decided there was already a filter between me and the students, and I didn't want to add an additional filter. So I grade everything. I answer all their questions. I have to retrain them, right? Every single time, like, no, you actually can send me an email and I will respond to you. And you can ask me anything, even if you think it's dumb or whatever, all the things that they're used to asking the TAs about. But it's been an eye-opening experience. I don't think I will go back to TAs unless I'm forced to. I feel like I get much better interaction, and I have a better understanding of where the students are at in their work, because I am the one that's grading all of their work and reading everything that they do. If you're pre-CFS, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're post-CFS and you want to have just a different experience in a big class, try doing it yourself and see what it's like. Okay, so first thing, reading skills are worse than you think they are. I've been using Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel ever since I started teaching this class. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with it. The reason why I continue to use it, even though it's a little bit outdated in some cases, is because it's accessible. It was written for a lay audience. There are book club questions in the back of the book, right? That tells you right there that this is something that is meant for a general audience. There are lots of other things I would like to read, but for 201, students just oftentimes don't have the capacity. So the argument of that book is stated really clearly in the prologue. He says, sometimes journalists ask me what the argument of my book is in one sentence. Here is that sentence. So when I taught this in the regular classroom, I just assumed they were getting that thesis. And I didn't really spend a whole lot of time on it. I mean, I didn't assess whether they were learning it. We just talked about it. And so they got it from context. They got it from me talking. They got it from their fellow students talking, whatever. But in an online class, I was suddenly having them write about this, right? I'd never had them really write about what the thesis of the book was. And that's one of the first reading responses that they have to do is, what is the purpose and thesis of this book? And I've been keeping the statistics for about 3 years, and between a quarter and a third do not get that thesis. which tells me that our students are not understanding things a lot of the time on the first read through. And it's something that I think we need to pay attention to. We need to remember that there are those students that are just not getting it that first read through. They might have gotten it a second time, maybe with a little bit more help, they might have gotten it, but I'm not sure how much more help to give because it says like, this is the argument of the book, right? It's still, maybe they're not sure what an argument is, but whatever it is, there are still a significant number of students who are struggling with these kinds of things. I actually decided to change my in-person classes because of this. And in my upper division courses, I now don't have students. Well, the way that I used to do it was I had students come to class having read the textbook, right? Or read whatever the assignment was. And then we talk about it in class. Now I talk about stuff in class and then they read what we talked about, so that gives them a little bit more like a little bit better foundation for the reading. And then they come back to class and we talk about some aspects of the reading after that, just to give them a little bit more help with that. And I think it's worked well. I'm teaching my Reformation course right now, and I haven't taught that course in about 6 years. And so I decided not to do that just because I didn't have time to fix it all. And I definitely will. I'm getting so many blank stares all the time when I ask them about the reading. And I think that I just would rather go back to flip it again. It's sort of backwards flipping. I don't know. Isn't that what flipping the classroom is? You do stuff before and then come. It's like, I'm going the other direction, but I think it's actually working better. I've also added a lot of material to my courses explaining why we are doing the things that we're doing. I think the students need that a lot. It tells them the kinds of skills that I want them to develop, how one thing leads to another, that sort of thing. A lot more signposts than before. And I just sort of scatter these through. And sometimes it comes in announcements that I give every week. Just like, hey, remember this, this is what we're doing here. I'm just pointing them back to different things a lot of the time. One of the things that I noticed was in the student ratings about the spirituality question, right? And this is hard to do in an online class, especially since, what people see as spirituality is something that's performed by the instructor. That's really hard to do in an online class. And so what I did was we talked a lot about world religions. And so every time we talk about a new world religion, there's a discussion that is about comparing the gospel of Jesus Christ to those world religions, right? And they actually work really well. I like those discussions. And I think lots of good things come out of them. But then I was getting student ratings like, yeah, she never talked about anything. Or, there was a scripture on the syllabus and that was it. And so they just weren't recognizing that this is what they were doing. So now I've put it into the instructions, like, this is where I'm giving you spiritual things, right? This is a way for you to understand your own religion in the context of other people's religions, right? And I know it seems ridiculous, but they really do need to be told in a lot of cases what it is that you're doing. They're not seeing the same structure that we are often seeing. And so I think that has helped quite a bit by just telling them. I also stick with penalties for not following instructions. One of the things that's, again, with reading, students don't read instructions well, and furthermore, they don't think they should have to read instructions. And so it's kind of like parenting, right? Where I'm not a parent, but this is what I can gather. If you give your student if you give your child a threat, right? If you don't do this, I'm going to do this. And then you don't ever do the thing, you don't ever follow up, then they learn they don't have to do the thing. And I think that sometimes happens with instructions. If there aren't any consequences for not following instructions, then they won't pay attention to them. So I've had to be pretty strict about some of those things. And then I also learned, it helped me figure out which things I was caring the most about. So that there were some things I just stopped caring about because I didn't want to enforce those rules anymore. And so that it helped me be a little bit more clear that way. Let's see. There's a couple more things I want to do to help with this as I go forward. With reading, one of the things that happens is you think, okay, I want students to be better at reading. I'll just keep throwing more reading at them. and it doesn't actually work a lot of the time. And so I want to do more sort of recordings or podcasts or something like that that go along with the readings. And I've been saying I wanted to do this for like 2 or 3 years, but haven't gotten around to it yet. And I think if I have to redo the course for GE, then that's when it will happen. But more things. Yeah, Darren.
Have you used any of those joint reading apps where basically, so the one I've used is Perusal,
Right.
and you can break it into groups of 10, groups of 5, whatever. And what I really loved about that is I go through the reading first and I annotate things I want them to pay attention to and ask questions, and they have to respond to questions. And so that I've had the best reading engagements with students using that, or I'm sure there's similar tools than any other thing that forces them to read because they're actually responding right.
Yeah.
But-
And I
and you
find
can
that-
kind of load anything into it.
Yeah.
You have to work with them to buy it, and they have to buy the book through the Perusal app and stuff, but.
Despite the fact that I'm teaching an online class, I'm sort of technology averse. And it's already like so much to get them to figure out how to use Canvas that I don't know if and Examine. So much. But
Platform fatigue is real.
yeah, and I'm not sure if I really want to train them on anything else. So I've tried to do some other things. Some things I'm going to talk about in just a bit, but yeah, there are definitely ways that you can do that too with other kinds of apps if you are less technology averse than I am.
Another quick question on reading.
Yeah.
I presume, I'm pretty sure Guns, Drink, and Skills is available in ebook and Audible. I use that in my lower survey too. Do you think that has any benefit? Have you noticed that students, I don't know, do they appreciate it more? I haven't noticed that my students have listened to the books. They're not.
Yeah, I know that they're doing it, and I don't tell them either way. It's fine if that's what they want to do. The next book they have to read is Herodotus. And I don't know if there's an ebook, but it probably wouldn't be worth it to do an ebook. And so then they have to sort of figure out how they're going to have to work their way through reading. So, yeah. Okay, next thing. You really are howling into the void. This has to do with writing instruction. An issue I've always had with doing, having students do drafts that then you make comments on and give them back, and then they just do whatever you told them to do. Right. I actually had, sometimes they're just gauging where you're at, right? They want to know, like, is this an A paper or is this a B paper? And do I want to do what I need to do to get the A, or is the B okay? Right. Once I had, this was a long time ago, back when we used paper. And I stupidly used a pencil to make comments on a student's paper. And then that student just erased all the comments and just turned it in again. Exactly. Because they didn't want to do the work that I had suggested. Right? They're just like, I'll just take the grade. Right. So here's what I discovered when I started this class, is that I wanted to do these short writing assignments, so 200 to 300 words that I could then give a lot of feedback on, or I could give feedback on. And I should say in Canvas, it's very easy to give feedback. It's not like you have to download a paper, make your comments, save it, upload it again. It's all right there. So it's much easier to do. And I know Kirk already knows this. This is my favorite thing about this. So I had about a class of about 130 students, and I wanted to know if they were reading the feedback. And I left a little note on every single paper that said, if you read this, send me an email, I'll give you 2 extra points on an exam. You want to guess how many out of 130 emailed me? 6. Yeah, so you really are howling into the void. You have to give them consequences for not looking at your feedback. That's essentially what it is. So initially, when I started doing these discussions and the reading responses, they're worth 5 points. I just figured, most of the time I'd be giving 5s, and I've quit that. Now I'm taking off points when they're not. If I tell them something and then it is repeated in a next assignment, I take points off and I tell them that's why you're losing points for this. Some of them will still absolutely refuse, but they're losing points, and that's their decision, right? That if that's what they want to do. It's worked really well with paragraphs. I mean, if you tell students to write 200 to 300 words, they will write one paragraph, and it's just thing after thing after thing, and there's no organization. And so I've just said, no, you have to write at least 2 paragraphs, and they have to be well organized paragraphs. And I've also explained to them that when they get out into the real world, nobody's going to want a 5-page paper on anything. And so you're going to be writing at small paragraph level. If you give a presentation or if you're making a proposal or something like that, you need to be able to write what you want to write in its short. People need to get it right away. And that's an important skill. And so once I've put it that way, I said, this is an important skill that you will use in your work. I think they've actually responded to it a little bit better. So I'm getting much better paragraphs now. It's one thing I can say I've been successful at. I still can't teach them its and all of those kinds of things, but I will keep marking them. Oh, I'm also trying something new this semester that may be a huge bomb. I'll let you know. So I have study guides for each of the exams. And I also have lists of terms and questions for each lecture for everything that they read. I have all of that to help them. So the 4th unit, none of it. I'm not going to give them any study guide or any terms and questions. And so I can see, is this something that you have learned, right? Have you learned how to do this? And I'm doing it in my in-person class too, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I may never do it again.
Have you told them?
Oh,
that?
yes, I told them.
They have a
Yeah.
heads up that on that last one, they won't. Okay.
Yep, and so that you're gonna have to start to figure this
Yeah.
out. I'm already sensing some bad things. There may be quite a curve this semester. Okay, the next thing has to do with scripts. And I learned this term from our colleague, Jeff Notes, who shouldn't be listening to me, who should just be reading some articles about pedagogy. But when teaching high school, I started out teaching high school for a couple of years in a little place called Duchesne, if you've ever been there. And so when I started teaching history there, and this was in the mid-90s, the only history that any students knew about was opening up the chapter to the end of the questions at the end of the book and copying out responses, right? And I didn't want that for this kind of class where it's all up to them, right? It's their lectures, they're doing a lot of reading. I didn't want the questions to just be like, oh, well, here's the answer to this question. I'll write it down and be done. So I came up with this idea, well, over time, this idea of scripts where I'm looking for certain patterns that fit all the different societies that we're talking about, and that they can then look for examples of those. So the class is World Civilizations. I say, well, what is a civilization? I give them 6 characteristics that historians have commonly used to define a civilization. I say, I want you to find these examples of these as you do your reading. And so then that's what you'll be tested on, right? And so I'll say, what are 3 characteristics of civilization, and give me an example from material that we've covered in class to illustrate those. And then after we've done that, then I say, now, what do you think about these characteristics? And we start looking at other societies that don't fit the pattern. And so then I'm teaching them to sort of break the script, right? That there are other ways that we can look at it. But then as I go through, there are others. There are scripts about characteristics of world religions, how do long-lasting empires maintain their power. And then I get to, there's a chapter in the textbook that I use, which is my absolute favorite chapter, where it compares non-Roman Europe and Africa before 200 and looks for similarities. And so I don't tell them, I just say, there's a script here, you should be looking for it, right? So then they have to find the script themselves. They're not great at it yet, but hopefully then. And then by the end of the semester, they're writing their own scripts. So I'll ask them to come up with a list of characteristics or reasons why globalization happened at the end of this time period, so that they're starting to learn that way too. So I'm giving them direction in their reading, but it's less of the, look for this particular thing and then just memorize that particular thing. So I'm hoping that it's a little more higher order thinking. I think that works pretty well too. And I'm starting to use this in my in-person classes as well, especially in my I teach a class that's just Europe since 1500. So we'll talk about something that's happening in one area of Europe, and then they'll read about a similar thing in another area of Europe. So that should give them an in, right? So they say, oh, these are some of the kinds of things that I should be looking for when I now look at it in another place. So, all right. So with an online class, I really wanted to make a rubric for everything. Why? It's easier for me. It means I can tell them exactly what they need to do. And then if they do it, I can just check it off and I'm done. And then they don't complain, right? And so then I don't have to deal with so many student complaints. But should education be just a list of tasks to check off, or should it be something else? I think trial and error is an important part of learning. And I wanted to make sure that I was giving students the opportunity for that in my classes. And so I've actually taken out all the rubrics except one, only for the primary source paper, and it's very vague. So there's no points associated with any of the items in the rubric. It's just, here are some things, and then I give them a score that corresponds to poor, below average, average, good, and excellent. So that I can just give them an idea of where they are on these particular things. But I don't give them any point. They want points, right? They'll come back and they say, well, I got a 92, but I got a 4 here. Does that mean? No, no, it's just a general idea. But I was a little bit worried about it. Was this going to make more work for me? I've done a couple of things. First of all, to cut down on grade complaints, I put in the syllabus that you can choose option A or option B at any point in the semester. Option A, you don't get to complain about any small point value, but at the end of the semester, I will give you from 1/2 to 3 points to bump you up to the next grade. If you choose to complain about small point values, you do not get that. So I've been doing this for about 2 years. No one has ever chosen option B until this semester. It has been fun. But for the most part, and I would have given them those points anyway, probably. And it's a small amount of points, but it actually works. And I tell them, it's fine to ask questions and that sort of thing, but I call it grade bargaining. If you're going to bargain for your grade, then you don't get the benefit of the doubt at the end. I've also, the main thing I've really done with this is I've given them plenty of opportunities for them to fail without completely tanking their grade. So there are 25 short assignments, they get to drop 5. There are 4 exams, they get to drop 1 of the first 3. And with an online class, that's really important because so many of them have no idea of how much work they're actually going to need to put in. And that's the common thing is they fail the first exam and they come to me and they say, oh, I didn't know it was going to be quite this much work. I'm like, yeah. I did warn you, but yeah, it is. So I try to build that in with a lot of flexibility so that if they do have a misstep, it's not the end of the world. And that's another way that I try to mitigate that. All right, we all know that our students try to game the system. They use the internet to fake higher order thinking skills. They lean on their TAs and TA review sessions and study groups instead of working the material themselves. They take shortcuts with reading. They want to do extra credit instead of doing the actual assignments, right? My favorite thing that I just discovered, I didn't know students were doing this. So I have them read Herodotus, not the whole thing, it's just selections of Herodotus. Right?
Bless you.
I give them different topics to write their paper on, right? So, and because I don't give them the whole thing, I often know if they use a quote from something that I didn't assign, that's a good sign to me that they have used other things outside of it. And so at one point, I talked to a student who had done this, right? He'd used quotations that were not in the assigned reading. And so I was just trying to understand what it was, how he did this. And he said, well, I had a PDF or an online version. I was just searching the text for key terms that I came up with that had to do with the paper topic. So he didn't read, right? He was just looking for quotes to pull out. And I'm like, oh, that was a whole other thing now I have to figure out how to deal with this, right? I knew these things existed before I started the online class, but it's made it even more apparent with an online class. They think, well, it's online, I can do anything I want. I can just take whatever online that I can, and that can be the thing. And today's students do not see the problem with this. They just don't. I blame capitalism because I blame capitalism for most everything. That they just think anything you need to do to get ahead, right? And even if that means using stuff on the internet. And so they're not developing independent thinking. And that's a real concern for me. There are things that I do, like I use Turnitin. I don't have TA review sessions. I don't do any study review sessions. If they want to make them themselves, that's great. But I don't offer them because I don't want any students using those as a crutch. I will, if there are individual students who want help from me, I work with them individually. But I'm not going to have a review session for the exam. And I don't give any extra credit. at all. And I stick with that too, even though they will constantly ask for it. But I think this is a big question that I don't have an answer to, but I think it's our responsibility as university educators to try to help our students understand that independent thinking is important. And at least get them to understand that, even if they're not doing it, I just want them to know, right? That this is something that they should be doing, and there will come a day when there won't be something on the internet that will help them. Maybe not, I don't know, maybe everything is out there, but you're gonna have to do some kind of independent thinking. So I don't know, I'm not sure about exactly how to do really well with this, but it's something that that doing this has made me think a lot about.
So most of you are probably familiar with the fact that there are Quizlets online for all of your classes. An additional challenge in the online format is they do screenshots of quiz and exam questions and make Quizlets. And so future generations of students know quizzes and exams. So that's another challenge that the online format adds to this. I'm dealing with the speed of it right now. So.
And my students are doing so poorly on the exams, I don't think it's working for them.
They're too lazy.
And so that's my next point. Failure is inevitable. And that's the student's failure and my own. When I first started teaching this class, I discovered that there were going to be a lot more students who will withdraw and a lot more students who will fail than I'd ever had before. So I'll give you some numbers here. You can look at those and take what you want from them. And I've got it reverse order so you can see it. It has gotten better, right? It has gotten a little bit better, but they do have problems, right? The course that I'm teaching right now, there are 126 students still enrolled, 8 who've already withdrawn, 7 who already haven't done enough to pass the class and will likely soon be withdrawing, and 15 who have failed 2 of the exams that I've given so far. So I just finished grading yesterday, so I'm going to be talking to those students and seeing what we can do to try to help them pass the class. It's hard to see, it's emotionally challenging to know that you have this many students who are failing in your class. There are reasons for it. Students who are already academically marginal are more likely to take online classes than other students, and so that's an issue. Students often just aren't used to the online format at all, so they struggle with it. And lots of times you get the withdrawals because there are students who think, oh, I'll just take this online class, it won't be that much extra work, and then they don't do anything for the first month, and then oh, I guess it was more than I thought, and so they end up dropping. And I think it's inevitably there are going to be more withdrawals in an online course, I think, than other courses. But some of them have really difficult personal situations. I've learned more about this from the online class than I ever did before. Some of them are taking classes because they need to stay in the country, right? Some of them are working full-time and they're trying to go to school full-time, and it's really, really difficult. Some of them have a lot of, I mean, you know all this, right? Really difficult personal challenges. And so in my opinion, this is a systemic problem at the university. We spend a lot of time with the top 20% of our students. All this emphasis on mentoring goes to them. But what about the bottom 10 to 20%? And these are students who lack basic skills. These are the ones who don't understand what a thesis is, that have a really difficult time reading anything longer than a couple of pages, even that. There are foundational things that they are missing. And we need to figure out ways that we can help these students. And it needs to be a university-wide effort, although of course our individual efforts are important as well. There's only so much I can do with individual students. There needs to be more resources, I think, for us to help these students who are really on those margins, who came into BYU for whatever reason without the skills that they really need to succeed here. That's something that I think we need to spend more time with.
So here, with the online format, future TAs, what are things TAs could do to supply some of that extra support?
Certainly there could be TAs. I mean, I don't use TAs, but you could use TAs if you want to have TAs reach out to some of these students. You could certainly do that. They did have BYU Online had a program at one point where they were identifying students who were most at risk and telling us about them, and then we could, they seem to have dropped it though. So I'm not, it doesn't seem to be working very well. But I would just like to have some, I would like to know how to teach a student who has very few reading skills. Like even with my background as a high school teacher, I didn't get enough of that then, and I still don't have it now. I'm not even sure what to do a lot of the time. So a student will come to me and just say, I'm doing all the things you said to do and I'm still failing. Right? Then I need to have something else for them to do. And I haven't figured out exactly what that is yet. But one of the things that I do is now I've just kind of given up on caring as much about late work. But here's what I do. I will give any student on reading responses, discussions, no, because they involve interaction with their classmates, but reading responses and exams, the student, all they have to do is email me. They don't have to give me a reason. They just say, I need 1 day, extra day on this assignment. Can I have it? I just give it to them. But they have to do it in advance. If they don't do it in advance, then I won't give it to them. They still get to drop 5 or one of the exams or whatever it is. So there's still even some flexibility there. But this is the way the real world works, right? If you get out in a job and something happens to you and you go to your boss and say, I can't quite get this done, you know, your boss is going to make accommodations for you. But if you just don't show up, right, that's when it becomes a problem. And so I tell them turning in an assignment means you're not showing up. If you come to me in advance, you know, I thought I was going to be flooded with requests. It turns out I really wasn't. It's a few every assignment. Sometimes, you know, some parts of the year are worse than others, but I think that's really helpful for a lot of students, and it helps them learn how to budget their time, right? And so if they could look and say, well, how am I going to get everything done? Oh, well, this teacher says I could do this late. I'll just take a little extra time, right? So I think that's helpful there. I also try to meet students where they are as much as possible, especially with writing assignments. So if there's a student who's really struggling with writing, I'll just throw a lot of the rules out of the window and just say, what's 1 or 2 things we could work on? So that you could feel like you could have a little bit more success with some writing. And so it might just be like, you're not going to use comma splices anymore, or it might be, you know, apostrophes or whatever it is. And then, I mean, these short assignments, it's like a half a point anyway. So if they're doing it, if they're actually succeeding in learning something, I just give them the points, right? I don't think it's that big of a deal. So try to meet them where they are as much as I can. All right, how much time do we have left? Oh, perfect. So here are my take home points. Whoops, I forgot to do that. We can actually interact with students in meaningful ways, commenting on student work, email. I do a lot of email with students. I thought I would do more Zoom. I'm finding a lot of them actually prefer email. So that's one thing that we can definitely do. Frequent short assignments can lead to improvement in writing. And sometimes it might be small, but I actually think in some ways it's more important than the big long papers, especially for a class like this one. We really have to teach the value of independent thinking, and I'll be pushing this one until I keel over. And somehow we have to help students understand that this is in their best interest. Flexibility is important, especially when you're dealing with the kinds of problems that our students have. I mean, they're way overscheduled. They have lots of issues in their lives that are really difficult. And so I think it's important for us to offer them some of that flexibility while also teaching them responsibility. We need to learn how to teach students who lack fundamental skills. That's something I think we need to make a push for wherever we can. There are certain things that we can do, but then it's something that I think we need to try to get the university to help us with too. All right, any other questions right now?
So question. So how do you assess them other than tests and that they're actually understanding what you read? You give quizzes or you rely on discussion?
It's mostly the reading responses. So not every single thing that they read, am I going to be able to know, right? If they're actually getting it or not. But there are selected things with the reading responses. That's mostly where I'm trying to figure out if they're getting it. So yeah, and that's why I like grading those instead of a TA, because then I can really see, oh, they're missing this, and everybody needs to be told this sort of thing or something like that.
Was going through the process of making all of those rubrics at all helpful for you? Because then you got rid of
Probably,
them.
yeah.
And then did it help you focus on this is what I actually care
What
about?
I actually care about, yeah, for sure, yeah. And I'm not saying just dump all of your rubrics. We just have to be thoughtful in the way that we use rubrics and not depend on them too much. So.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of questions on the syllabus. Do they read the syllabus? Is that one of the assignments that you have that's docked points? Do they actually get to the materials? Because I know you take your syllabus very seriously.
Yeah, I haven't made anything, they're just doing an introduction assignment where they introduce themselves, and then I tell them they should have read all this beforehand if they have any questions or that sort of thing, but there's nothing specific with the syllabus, so.
And then sometimes I find that when I do the reading of the book in the way that you suggested, sometimes the students say, oh, you only went over the book in the lecture. How do you vary that, or how do you help them to see that that's not all that you're doing?
Oh, so they're saying, well, I'll get it from
Right.
you, so I need to get it from both,
Exactly, or
yeah.
vice versa.
Oh, and I think often what I will try to do is say, all right, here's something I'm gonna go over in the textbook. Then you're gonna read this other part of the textbook that I haven't gone over, but what you've done should help you do this, right? So that's probably how I would handle that.
I would say students, with that line of reasoning, make the ill-formed assumption that if I've read it or heard it once, then I've got it.
Mm.
So I always reinforce the students, you need to, if you really want to get this, you need to tread over it multiple times.
Well, and you can use the church for help with that, like, how many times do we go over the same conference talk, right? Or whatever, you can actually use that with students, say, you know, we're not, you probably won't get it.
No,
That was their spiritual nugget.
Jeff, did you want to say something? Okay, Darren?
How do you do the discussion groups? There's 150 students. I presume it's not one big discussion.
Oh, yeah, it's,
And is it the same group all the way through the semester, or is it randomized, switched
So
out here and there?
they're about somewhere between 10 and 15 students, depending on how many withdraw. But I do switch them up, so they'll do 3 discussions with each group, and then I create whole new groups. So there's about 4 different groups that they're in, just so they can have different interactions with students. And so, yeah, so they're in different groups. I give them a question. I give them pretty specific instructions for what a good discussion should look like. And then the first time my first questions were terrible. They were not helpful. And I think I finally got them. I mean, some of them are still needing a little work, but I mean, it's taken a lot of time to figure out exactly what kind of question will work well and what kind of question won't. And I'm really like conflict averse as well. And so I try not to deal with issues that students are gonna get really upset over. Probably the biggest one is once COVID started, I asked on the lecture about the plague, right? I just say, how has learning about the plague helped you understand COVID better? And the first couple of times I did this, no problem. And then as soon as mask wearing and vaccination became politicized, my discussions became politicized, right? And so I try to avoid those kinds of issues, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should be better about that, but I'm trying to mostly keep it in the past as much as I can. So, yeah.
Do you get a sense that there's any interaction between any of your students outside of the class for study sessions or anything else? Is there a way to facilitate that?
Yeah, I mean, I tell them they can send messages to each other, they can form study groups, and I know some of them do. The main reason I know that some of them do is because some of them are dumb enough to include me on their emails where they're talking about Google Docs that they're filling out. Which then I have to tell them, no, it's on the syllabus, don't do that. But I know that they're doing it anyway. And that you're never going to stop it completely, but I know that they are interacting somewhat. Yeah.
This is the second time I've heard you mention about mentoring, how that privileges the top 20% of our students, and we're kind of leaving the other 80% in the dust, including especially the bottom 20 or 30% that are really struggling. I agree that there's a lot there beyond our abilities to individually address as instructors. If you could have your way in instituting some institutional changes that would address that, what would that look like?
I mean, they have different programs for students that are like study skill types of classes and things. I would like to see more of that built into the curriculum. And I would also like to see us have the flexibility to say, all right, if I've got these students that really lack some foundational skills, maybe I can teach them in a whole different way and keep them within the same class. And especially in the online format, we should be able to do that, but it's going to take a lot to get there. So that would be one thing. I'm not sure exactly what else to do, but I would like more training on how to teach students to read. We need more than one writing specialist in the college. We need a reading specialist. There are just a lot of those kinds of things that I think we could And I'm talking to all of you and you're all nodding your heads like, yeah, we need this, but you know.
That's helpful. Oh, thank you.
All right, well, let's see, Karen then.
Thank you all for coming. My biggest fear was that nobody would come, so I'm feeling good.
The withdrawal rate was very low.
So it's an on.